if you can hear us, and also if you can see the slides in the chat box, please. Okay, I can see. Yes, okay, so we're ready to get going. Welcome everyone. We're really excited to have so many of you join us for this webinar today. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending you the link and a follow-up email tomorrow. And also we'll be sending you a link for the evaluation for this webinar in that same email, as well as 3 additional handouts that will be attached to that email. You'll notice the webinar sidebar on the screen. And in the handout tab, we did include, if you click on the triangle beside the word handouts, the slides are there for you for the presentation in a PDF format. In the question tab, we encourage you to enter any questions you have in this area. My coworker Hiltrud Dawson will answer any small questions that you may have, but regarding content, we will do our best to reply to any unanswered questions during the webinar. And if we can't answer all of your questions today, we'll do it after the webinar through email. So before we begin this webinar, I'd like to begin with acknowledging that we're gathered on Indigenous land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples from the beginning. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We recognize and acknowledge that we meet on the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. This recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous peoples must be connected to our commitment to make the promise of providing culturally safe care to our Indigenous families. So Best Start by Health Nexus, which is the host of today's webinar, produces multimedia resources in multiple languages on a broad range of topics related to preconception health, prenatal health, and early child development. Most of our resources can be downloaded free of charge, and many of them can be adapted for local use. Please contact the Best Start Resource Center for more information at www.beststart.org. We also have electronic bulletins to help you stay up to date on current trends in preconception, prenatal, and child health promotion. And our online networks, listservs, help you to exchange ideas, strategies, and best practices with other service providers and experts. If you are interested in joining one of our listservs, please go on our Best Start website and please sign up. I'll pass the presentation now over to Olga.
Hi, everyone, and thank you again for joining this webinar today. My name is Olga, and I'm a health promotion consultant at Health Nexus. So the main objective of this webinar is to talk to you about infection prevention and control in your home during this COVID-19 pandemic. These are the topics that we will be addressing today during this webinar. The resources used to support the content of this webinar include Government of Canada, Public Health Agency of Canada, Ontario Public Health, information presented by Canadian academic and science professionals, as well as UNICEF and World Health Organization. Just a little disclaimer. The information presented here is current as of today, and as new evidence is evolving, there may be new studies which support current recommendations presented today by health authorities or provide other recommendations based on emerging and new knowledge. With the exception of hand washing and personal protective equipment, of course, this information has been consistent for a number of years now. The links to all the resources which are used during these presentations are provided at the end of the slide deck and will be available on a Health Nexus website along with this webinar. So we're going to talk about hand hygiene technique and personal protective equipment, also known as masks and gloves, and also COVID-19 and food safety, COVID-19 and infant feeding, cleaning your house during COVID-19 pandemic, and caring for a family member who is or who does have COVID-19 infection. Next slide, please. So before we begin talking about infection prevention and control, we need to address the most important thing, that is how to properly wash your hands and how to put on masks, and how to put on masks and remove masks, and how to put on gloves and remove gloves properly. Of course, all of you have heard about the importance of washing hands to prevent the spread of COVID-19. However, as probably all of you know, many people are not washing their hands correctly. Here, we present you with the links to the videos showing the correct technique for washing and sanitizing your hands, which are approved by the World Health Organization. These links will be emailed to you after this webinar and will also be available in this slide deck that we will post on our Best Start by Health Nexus website. The most important thing to remember is that during hand washing or sanitizing, it is the rubbing that gets the germs off your hands. So the technique and the duration is critical to make this process effective. Let's also talk about masks. Currently, Health Canada does not recommend against wearing masks in public when physical distancing is not possible, for example, grocery stores. However, putting it on properly and removing it correctly is very important for it to be effective in protecting you against COVID-19. Please follow the links provided to see the correct technique. Also, gloves. Putting gloves on is straightforward. However, removing them correctly might be tricky. We highly recommend you to watch the video provided because you might be surprised that there is the only one correct way to remove your gloves. Next slide, please. So proper technique or how to put on gloves and a mask. So now let's imagine that you would like to put on gloves and a mask. In which order you're going to do it? The correct order is the one that you see on the screen. First, we wash our hands or use the hand sanitizer. So just remember that the hand sanitizer should dry before you put on the gloves. So second, we put on a mask. The simple explanation for us today is that putting a mask with your gloves on might be a bit tricky and inconvenient, right? And after we put on the mask, then we put on the gloves. Next slide, please. Now we have to take off our gloves and masks, and this is the correct way to do it. First, we remove gloves, then we wash our hands. You probably wonder why we have to wash our hands after removing gloves. You just wait a little bit for us to provide an additional explanation to this. So right now we're just explaining the order. And later in the slides, we will be talking about why it is important to actually wash your hands after removing the gloves. Then we remove the mask, and then we wash our hands again. Once more, you might wonder why we have to wash our hands again. So washing your hands after you have removed the mask is needed in case you have accidentally touched the outer surface of your mask, or the mask is saturated with droplets after you have been coughing into it. Therefore, your hands might have virus on them after you have touched your gloves. So that's why it's important to wash or sanitize your hands after you have removed your mask. Next slide, please. Now, when we have covered the basics, we can talk about some important topics which mostly get people worried or anxious during this pandemic. So let's start with food safety during COVID-19 pandemic. Currently, based on the knowledge available, the risk of food being contaminated with COVID-19 virus is low to very low. Also, there is no evidence confirming that COVID-19 can be spread through food. The greatest risk is getting a virus from a close contact with an infected person in a grocery store. Next slide, please. However, during this pandemic, some precautions may be introduced to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Those are the precautions that you see on the screen that you can implement in your daily life during the COVID-19 pandemic. First and foremost, it is important to wash your hands before and after unpacking food items when you come home from the grocery store. This also pertains to washing hands before entering the grocery store to protect the people around us, and after leaving the grocery store to protect us and our family. Also, UNICEF suggests The following strategies when unpacking food items at home. Removing all unnecessary packaging and disposing them into a waste bin with a lid. Packaging like cans can be wiped clean with a disinfectant before being opened or stored. Washing unpackaged produce such as fruits and vegetables thoroughly under running water, but it is very important, do not add soap, as it can cause stomach upset, vomiting, or diarrhea, and we can talk about this in more detail just a bit later. There has been some discussions around disinfecting individual food packaging among food safety experts in Canada. And currently, it is not recommended just due to the lack of evidence that COVID-19 can be transmitted this way. However, if you like to do it, ensure that you let the package air dry. Do not wipe it immediately, as disinfectant needs to stay on the surface to work and kill the virus. We will talk about this in more detail later. Now, coming back to washing fruits and vegetables with soap and water. So, washing fruits and vegetables with soap is also becoming a common practice, but it is not recommended as well. As according to the food experts, fruits and vegetables have pores. It means that they have very tiny holes in their skin and can actually absorb the chemicals that are in soaps, which can then be ingested. Next slide, please. Cooking and preparation during during COVID-19 pandemic. Another very common question is whether you should prepare or cook food differently during this pandemic. The answer to this question is no. Again, as of now, the recommendations remain to cook the food according to the usual food safety guideline, which can be found on Health Canada website. The link to this guideline is also available at the end of this presentation. Right now, it is important to follow usual food safety steps recommended by Health Canada and UNICEF in your daily routine, including wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water for at least 20 seconds before and after preparing any food. Use separate cutting boards to prepare uncooked meat, fish, poultry, and produce. Cook food to the recommended temperature. See Health Canada for recommended temperatures. It is also available in a brief that we will be emailing to you. Keep perishable items refrigerated or frozen and pay attention to product expiry dates. Clean your kitchen and countertops and surfaces, including cutting boards and sinks. It is very important to clean and disinfect your sinks, especially if you're about to put the raw meat in there, before and after preparing food. It is advised to use paper towels, wipes, or single-use cloths to avoid the risk of cross-contamination and the spread of the bacteria. To clean, use a kitchen sanitizer or disinfectant, as directed by the manufacturer, or a bleach solution. So there are different ways on how you can make a bleach solution, but for kitchen countertops and for sinks, what you can do is that you can take 5 milliliters of household bleach diluted in 750 milliliters of water. So I'm just going to repeat that again. It's 5 milliliters of bleach diluted in 750 milliliters of water. And it's also important that after you have disinfected your cutting boards, your sinks, your countertops, rinse all items carefully with water before cooking, so there will be no disinfected residue on the surface. Also, aim to recycle or dispose of food waste and packaging in an appropriate and sanitary manner, avoiding buildup. Wash your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds before eating, and make sure your children do the same. Always use clean utensils and plates. And all of this information is available in a supplemental brief, which will be emailed to you after this webinar, along with the evaluation. It will also be available on our website. Next slide, please.
Yes, thank you, Olga. Breastfeeding is the natural way to feed your baby. And we're going to talk about COVID-19 and infant feeding. COVID-19 has not been detected in human milk, and breastfeeding provides immunity to your baby and reduces the risks of infectious diseases. babies who are fed formula, infant formula, are at an increased risk of respiratory and gastrointestinal infections. And breastfeeding, we know, provides your baby with antibodies and immune factors. So if you're thinking of weaning during this pandemic, consider delaying if possible, because we know that breastfeeding protects your baby. And also, if you were, in the process of weaning and we'd like to encourage you to increase your milk supply, or even also think about restarting breastfeeding relactation. And there is an excellent document on UNICEF UK that can help you with restarting breastfeeding, as we refer to as relactation. But in many situations, parents make the informed decision to give their baby infant formula. But there are things that you should consider if you are thinking about giving your baby baby formula. First of all, how do you feel about giving formula to your baby now that you know the risks? And hopefully a service provider or a healthcare provider will go through all of the risks of giving formula to your baby. Number two, are you prepared? Are you able to prepare and feed infant formula safely in your community, in your home? Are you able to do this safely? Number three, do you understand what the costs are of formula? And do you understand that the formula is going to be needed for 9 to 12 months? Also understanding that the size of your baby's stomach will be growing as the weeks and months progress, and so you will be needing to feed your baby a larger amount of infant formula. So you have to think about all that. Are you able to afford that, in your situation? And also, do you know how to feed baby formula properly by responding to their feeding cues? So those are things that you should keep in mind as a parent or family if you are considering infant feeding with formula during COVID-19. So what do I need to know about formula? So you might ask yourself, is formula readily available for my baby during this pandemic? As far as we know, there are no shortages of infant formula supplies in Canada, although some families have reported that there's less selection available at local stores. And Safely Fed is a great resource, and they did put on their website that if you use formula, it's not necessary to stockpile 6 months worth of formula, for instance, but to buy a little bit more formula than you need, but plan to have at least a 4-week supply on hand. Now, there has been some shared stories with me from Northern Ontario, where I live, stating that certain large store chains are limiting the number of infant formula cans that people can purchase at one time. And this is a huge problem for those who have delivered their baby in a larger center in the north, for instance, and are getting ready to fly back to their communities or return to their northern community. So, and they would want to purchase a month's worth of formula to bring back with them. So there has been some issues with food security in those instances. And these are anecdotal stories that have been shared with me. So COVID-19 and infant feeding, how do I prepare formula safely during COVID-19? So when you're getting ready to prepare formula, always practice clean hand hygiene, as Olga reviewed with you, by washing your hands before you start. You should wash and sterilize all the feeding equipment by following the steps outlined in the 3 resources that I've put there for you, and the links to their PDFs. And these can all be found under the nutrition tab in the Best Start on the Best Start Resource Center website. So I would encourage you to visit those and go through these resources. When you're feeding formula to your baby, always wash your hands, and always remember to feed your baby by responding to their feeding cues. And there's more information on how to recognize your baby's feeding cues on these resources that have been listed here on this slide. So if you're not sure what I'm referring to, you can review. There's some great pages in these handouts on how to feed according to your baby's feeding cues. So these are the three resources that I put the pictures of the resources that I put the link on the previous slides. And these are resources how to safely prepare infant formula that you can download for free. And the resources are available in 18 different languages from the Best Start Resource Center website, and also can be found at breastfeedingresourcesontario.ca, and I have the two links there on your slide. The video that we adapted from York Region Public Health accompanies the tip sheets that you see on the left. So as you can use that to follow, to have the tip sheet with you and listen to the video at the same time. And the video itself is only available in English and in French. So keep that in mind. So COVID-19 and formula preparation. So if you're suspected or confirmed with COVID-19 as a parent, try to have an adult in your household who's not sick feed and prepare the formula if possible. And if this isn't possible and you must prepare the formula and feed your baby, wear a mask when preparing and feeding formula to your baby. Practice the clean hand hygiene by washing your hands before you start preparing formula. Clean and disinfect with approved hard surface disinfectants, any hard surface that you touch. That's a recommendation from Health Canada. Olga will be going through some approved disinfectants and how you can do that. Wipe the outside of the formula container and prepare the formula carefully following the guidelines found in the three resources listed on the previous slides. I also included a little bit of information here around pumping or expressing your breast milk at home and how you can do this safely. When expressing or pumping breast milk, hand wash before and after and wear a mask. After each pumping session, thoroughly clean and disinfect all pump parts that come in contact with human milk and disinfect the entire pump surface following each session. The World Health Organization document that just came out last week states that if you have just coughed over your exposed breast or chest, then gently wash the breast with soap and water for at least 20 seconds prior to expressing your milk. But it's not necessary to wash your breasts each time before expressing your milk. So that is a guideline from the World Health Organization. Sterilize again all your feeding equipment like you would do at any time carefully before each use. And to sterilize feeding equipment, you can follow the guidelines found in the three resources that I showed to you in previous slides. But in summary, just filling a large pot of water, a large pot with water, and adding all of the feeding equipment until covered, and bringing the pot to the pot of water to a boil, and letting it boil for 2 minutes. That is the guidelines for sterilizing your feeding equipment. And again, if you can have a healthy adult feed the express breast milk to your baby, if you're too sick to care for your baby, that would be definitely preferred. So I'm going to pass this back to Olga now.
Thank you, Lan, for this wonderful summary. So now we will talk about cleaning and disinfecting your house. But before we do that, I think it's important for us to find out what it actually means, because there might be confusion of terms. So cleaning products remove germs or dirt or impurities from surfaces by using soap or detergent and water. Cleaning does not necessarily kill germs, but removes them and lowers their numbers and the risk of spreading infection. Disinfecting products, on the other hand, kill germs on surfaces using chemicals. This information is taken from Health Canada. Next slide, please. Currently, the recommendations around house cleaning mostly highlight the cleaning practices required when caring for a person or a child with COVID-19, which we will discuss in a bit. However, UNICEF provides some recommendations around regular house cleaning during the whole COVID-19 pandemic. So what they recommend is to clean or disinfect all high-touch surfaces regularly. So what are the high-touch surfaces? So they include toilets, laundry containers, bedside tables, doorknobs, phones, electronics, and television remotes. We will talk in the next slide how to clean those, and also toys. There's separate slides on how to clean toys. So if there's a person in the house who actually does have COVID-19, then you would clean or disinfect all high-touch surfaces daily. So I would probably have to say disinfect, because sometimes people use clean and disinfect interchangeably, but in this circumstances, we will say that you would need to disinfect all high-touch surfaces daily if the person has COVID-19 infection in your house. If the surfaces are visibly dirty, this is very important, you would have to clean them first with soap and water before disinfecting. You probably wonder why. So there is existing evidence that some disinfecting solutions, like bleach, for example, may lose its disinfecting capacity when coming in contact with organic material, for example, urine or vomit or feces. So it's important to clean and then disinfect. Also, only use approved hard surface disinfectants or bleach solution, and we will describe in detail how to make bleach solution later. However, if you do have approved hard surface disinfectant, you can use that, and those are some of the examples on the screen. So, for example, Clorox, Lysol, Fantastic, Microban, Zep. So all of those have been approved by Health Canada. So at the end of the slide deck, there is a website, Health Canada website, where you can actually go to and type your disinfectant and find out whether it was approved by Health Canada or not. Also, the use of vinegar and natural products is not recommended. And the reason being is because there's just simply no proof that of their effectiveness in stopping the spreading of the virus. And very important point to remember is when you decide to disinfect, please do not mix vinegar and other acids like lemon juice, ammonia-containing products such as Vindex, or rubbing alcohol with bleach, because it can actually create toxic gases, which are very harmful for your body. And lastly, when you're disinfecting, the solution should be left on the surface to air dry, as it actually needs time to kill the virus. So disinfect the surface, let it air dry, and then you can wipe it if it comes, for example, in contact with food, as we discussed earlier. Next slide, please. So you might wonder, what is the best way to clean electronics in order not to damage them with a harsh disinfectant? So the approved way to do this is to take 70% alcohol solution, lightly applied to a single-use gauze, paper towel, or a cloth. Alcohol prep wipes can be used as well. So there's a there's a Purell alcohol wipes that you can buy in Shoppers or other stores that are available. Sometimes they're also used to sanitize your hands as an alternative way to hand sanitizer. So those wipes have been approved to use on electronics to disinfect them. And if there is a person in the house with positive COVID-19 infection, then sanitizing electronics should be done daily. After the surface has been wiped with this alcohol solution, leave the area for 10 minutes to air dry. And again, it has to be done daily, as I mentioned. So if there is no disinfectant, approved hard surface disinfectant in your house, then you can use the diluted bleach solution. So in order to do that, what you do is that you take 1 tablespoon or 5 milliliters of bleach per 250 milliliters of water. So it's 1 glass, usually it's 1 glass, and there is a 1 teaspoon. Sorry, I said tablespoon, it's a teaspoon. If you would like to make a bottle, what you can do is that you can take 4 teaspoons or 20 milliliters of bleach, regular household bleach, diluted in 1 liter of water. This is a very strong bleach solution. Even though it seems like there's a very little bleach in 1 liter of water, it's actually a very strong concentration of bleach solution, and it should be handled with care, especially if you have kids around. So with all household disinfectants, house cleaning solution should be kept away from children. Next slide, please. So now we will talk about toys cleaning. I think it's a, a very interesting area, and a lot of parents probably wondering how should I clean my child's toys. So whether or not the child has positive case of COVID-19, the following strategies can be used for just a regular toy cleaning. And we will talk in detail what to do if child does have COVID-19. So, however, if the child does have a confirmed or presentative case of COVID-19, the toys uh, may be considered as a high-touch surface and should be cleaned daily to prevent the spread of infection to other family members. One of the most important things is to try your best to prevent sharing of toys between a child with a confirmed case of COVID-19 and other children or family members who do not have COVID-19 infection. If the toys cannot be disinfected, for example, books or puzzles or magazines, they should not be shared between a child who is sick with COVID-19 and a child who does not have COVID-19. When a child is not sick with COVID-19 anymore, those books or puzzles or magazines can be put away for about 3 to 4 days and then reused. And the reason for this is that there are studies which showed that COVID-19 can live on some surfaces for up to 3 days. So technically, if the toy is put away for about 3 to 4 days, there should be no live virus on its surface. However, as you know, the evidence around COVID-19 is evolving, so this information may change in the future. The bleach solution, which needs to be used for toy cleaning, is different from previously described. So it's not as strong as the bleach solution that you would use for high-touch surfaces, other high-touch surfaces around the house. The concentration that we will be describing here is different. So if you need to clean your child toys, what you need to do? If they're visibly dirty, or if you think that there is a lot of stuff on the toy, what you can do is that you can clean toys with soap and water first. Then you would have to disinfect the toy. And you can use 3 methods to do that. So you can put a toy in a dishwasher, and it can only be done if the toy is allowed by the manufacturer to be washed in a dishwasher, because the temperature in a dishwasher should reach at least 82 degrees Celsius. So it's very high, especially if you're putting a plastic toy in the dishwasher, you have to make sure that it's heat resistant. The other method is to use 70% alcohol solution that we described earlier and leave it for 10 minutes on the surface of the toy so it can air dry. Or you can use bleach solution. And it is this bleach solution is different, as I mentioned. So for toys cleaning, you would have to take 2 tablespoons of bleach in 3 liters of water. And after you have disinfected the toys, you would have to rinse them thoroughly. And as you know, it's important because if there is any disinfectant residue on the toys, it can be harmful for children. And then you air dry them for storage. Next slide, please. So now we will talk about caring for a family member who might have positive or presentative case of COVID-19. Some recommendations also apply to you that you're going to see on the slides if, for example, you are positive with COVID-19, but still need to care for your loved ones. These are the recommendations that are developed by Health Canada, and the detailed list of the recommendations are available on Health Canada website, and they state that how to care for a family member positive who has positive COVID-19 infection, or how to care for a child who has COVID-19 infection. So the links to those recommendations are also available at the end of this presentation. However, right now we would like to highlight some of the recommendations which are very important. Health Canada does recommend to wear a mask when caring for a person with COVID-19 infection. There are many questions and debates around which mask is effective, as you know. So Health Canada actually has provided us with the recommendations on how to make your own mask from cloth at home if the medical mask is not available. So the instructions to those recommendations can be found on Health Canada website. So those are the recommendations surrounding masks. So if you do have a family member who is positive with COVID-19, you should wear a mask, homemade or a medical mask, when you are within 2 meters of that person. Give a sick person a mask to wear as well. The mask should be breathable, but it should fit snugly, covering your mouth and nose. It should be discarded if it's single use or washed on high temperature cycle when it becomes damp. So Health Canada states that masks can be washed with other clothes, which can also sustain the high temperature cycle. Also, it is very important not to put a mask on a child younger than 2 years of age because it may cause difficulty breathing, and also people who do have difficulty breathing, like asthma or other medical conditions. If you do have COVID-19 infection yourself, you should also wear a mask when caring for your family members. For example, when you're preparing food or cleaning their environment, for example, their rooms, or when you changing their linens, just to avoid the spread of the virus to your family members. So next slide, please. So gloves. There are a lot of discussions about gloves, and I think it's very important to touch on this during this presentation. So Health Canada again recommends to wear gloves when caring for a family member who is COVID-19 positive. So what do we mean by care? So for example, when you're washing your family members, when you're feeding them, when you're touching them, when you're cleaning their environment, as I mentioned earlier, like dishes, linens, furniture, washroom, etc. If you are positive with COVID-19, there is no need to wear gloves, but frequent hand washing is important. Another question is about whether you should disinfect gloves after caring for a person who has confirmed case of COVID-19. And the answer is no. So let's talk about this in more detail, as we have promised earlier in this presentation. Wearing gloves does provide a physical barrier. This is why it is recommended when you care for a person who does have COVID-19 infection. However, it is not a substitute for hand washing, as gloves, especially if they're not medical. They do have pores. So pores are microscopic holes in your gloves through which bacteria or a virus can actually travel and contaminate your hands. This information might be surprising for many people. And this can happen, especially if gloves were worn over a long period of time, because they do wear and tear, but you don't see it. So washing your hands after removing gloves is very, very important. Also, hand washing or rubbing is effective due to the manual removal of a pathogen, pathogen meaning a virus or a bacteria. So removing a pathogen from the surface of the hands with your dead skin cells during the process of washing. This cannot be achieved with glove disinfection at home. It's just not possible. So disinfecting gloves can actually lead to contamination of surfaces with the virus, as when you have touched the infected surface and then attempted to disinfect the gloves, these gloves may still have the virus on them, but you are not aware of this. And you continue to touch other surfaces with the dirty gloves, which you thought have disinfected, and the surfaces which were not contaminated with the virus previously are contaminated with the virus now. This is why the use of gloves is not recommended currently for the general public, as it creates a false sense of security. If you don't have single-use gloves at home, the best way might actually be to wash your hands frequently and properly to avoid the spread of virus. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
So we will talk about sharing very briefly. So when you care for a family member who does have positive COVID-19 infection, or if you have COVID-19 infection, please do not share such items as food, drinks, dishes, clothes, towels, toothbrushes, electronics, or linens. So also, if it's possible, do not share bathrooms if it's possible. If not, then the bathrooms should be disinfected daily, as we talked about in the previous slide. So right now, this slide actually concludes our presentation. And now Yolanda and myself can take some questions from the participants.
Yes, we have some time right now, Olga, to review some questions, and I'm just looking at the question box here. This is a question directed to you, Olga, and it's regarding utilizing Clorox or other disinfectants or even a bleach solution. But they're asking if you're wiping, let's say, a bread pack with a plastic covering or any item that's in a plastic bag, um, or even like Tetra Packs, could it affect the food inside the pack? Do you know that if disinfectants or bleach solutions affect the food? Do they penetrate these plastic coverings of our food that we see quite commonly in our society?
So it's a very interesting question, and I think I cannot advise on that because I just haven't seen any studies done to actually test whether some materials are more porous, right? So meaning that some materials have more tiny holes in them to allow some of the liquid to pass by and some are not. So I can't really answer to that. But maybe it's just my presumption that food experts do not recommend wiping every single packaging with a disinfectant, might be because of that reason, but it cannot be proven at this moment in time. So what I can say is just based on current recommendations, it's not recommended. However, UNICEF does recommend wiping the metal cans with a disinfectant before storing it away.
Exactly. Great, great. I don't see any other questions that have come in. There's been some smaller questions that Hiltrude has addressed, but I don't see anything else. And right now in the question box. So I think what we're going to do, everyone is extremely busy this time with COVID-19 and all of the important work that we're doing, and families also have many responsibilities right now. I just would like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Again, a follow-up email will be sent to you tomorrow with the link to this recording of this webinar. So we encourage you to share it with anyone that you think would benefit from hearing this webinar. And also we'll be sending you the link to a short evaluation, and that's always important for us to get feedback from you, because sometimes it does flush out some other topics that you might be interested in hearing about. And also, as Olga mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, that we will be attaching three documents, PDFs of some documents on how to clean toys. What are the other topics for the PDFs, Olga, that we'll be sending tomorrow? Could you pipe
So
in,
food,
please?
yeah, absolutely. So food safety. Topics that we have discussed today during this presentation is just a little more detail, summarizing the recommendations, and also how to care for a family member or how to care for an infant or a child who is actually positive with COVID-19.
Great, great, thank you. And you'll see in your slide deck, we have added a lot of references for you with the links, so that you're able to just click on the links and hopefully get a lot more information from from these really well researched sites, websites, and hopefully that'll answer many other questions. If you do have other questions for Olga or myself, we both work at the Best Start Resource Center, Health Nexus, and you can contact us at any time, send us an email, and we're more than happy to follow up with any questions that you might have after this webinar. So thank you everyone for
Yolanda,
attending. Yes,
Yolanda,
yes,
see, there's one more question came in
okay,
among the thank yous. If you buy,
okay.
for example, a box of cereal bars, should they be taken out of the box and the box discarded?
Good question. Wow.
So I think it's a very interesting question. I think it might be considered unnecessary packaging as described by the UNICEF. So they're saying during the COVID-19 pandemic, it is a wise idea to discard all unnecessary packaging after you brought it home. So I think the answer to your question is yes.
It makes a lot of sense,
Good.
Olga,
Yeah,
for
makes
sure.
sense.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense for sure. So thanks, Hildude, for catching that. And yeah, and again, if you still have any other questions or even want to talk to us, please don't hesitate to contact either the three of us, Hildude Dawson, Olga, and myself, and we're more than happy to share with you what we've learned along the way also. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and have a great afternoon. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.